Hello and welcome. This is part one of a recap of a presentation recently delivered in Drayton Valley, Alberta, Canada, to industry representatives in response to their requests for more information relating to some CRN topics that they selected. Cammar Corporation is also available to come to your workplace or place of convenience to deliver a customized presentation about pressure equipment topics of most interest to you and your colleagues. Ordinarily, if the presentation is in a conference room with about 15 people or less, we like to go around the room and ask the participants to briefly introduce themselves so that they can mention any questions that they have on their minds at the outset and so that we can address them during the presentation. If the presentation is to one company and their representatives alone, then this allows for a detailed question and answer period where confidential information can be discussed and solutions relating to their particular and specific issues can be identified. My name is Cameron Sterling, and I facilitate the learning sessions put on by Cammar Corporation. I'm its director. I've been a professional engineer in Canada since 1991 and am registered in Alberta with APEGA, that's the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Alberta, and in Ontario with the PEO, Professional Engineers Ontario. At Cammar Corporation, I provide expertise in relation to pressure equipment design, evaluation, compliance, and registration requirements. All of these topics relate to helping clientele obtain Canadian registration numbers and to enhancing pressure equipment and public safety. In Canada, regulators register pressure equipment before use, and I used to work at one called ABSA. ABSA is the pressure equipment safety regulator in Alberta. At ABSA, I was a safety codes officer and national board commissioned inspector, and after evaluating designs, I registered them for legal use in Canada. I registered thousands of them and am thoroughly familiar with the Canadian registration number process, including design evaluation, code, and regulation compliance. I've also worked at engineering, procurement, and construction companies. With the relatively high per capita concentration of pressure equipment in Alberta, ABSA is a very significant pressure equipment regulator in Canada. Experience from working at ABSA is very valuable to industry. As mentioned earlier, the agenda for these information learning sessions put on by Cammar Corporation depends on you, the audience, and the topics that you would like discussed. Cammar Corporation customizes its presentations to meet your needs. For example, in Drayton Valley recently, industry representatives wanted us to talk about several topics over the 1.5-hour session, and they included things like documentation requirements for CRN and pressure piping applications, including construction reports and data reports. So that would cover things like AB 31 forms, AB 41, AB 96, AB 257, AB 81, AB 83, and so forth. But not only that, they wanted us to briefly talk about the information that is necessary to appear on the drawings, the design information, the specifications, the dimensions, all sorts of things, very technical details, and we were happy to do so. There was also interest in pressure testing requirements, particularly for fittings, in relation to the ASME B31.1 and ASME B31.3 codes of construction, and the differences between the two. Others had some interest in modifications to fittings and in what circumstances that could possibly occur. And so that was discussed. And still others had interest in intermixing components and, under what circumstances, if any, that could occur. And then finally, priorities in building a quality control program were discussed, and we touched on quality manuals, quality procedures, and quality work products. At the end of the presentation, there was some time for questions and answers and individual discussion, where questions were answered on an as-needed basis. Before proceeding further, I would like to mention that topics discussed in this presentation series constitute Cammar Corporation's perspective alone and are not necessarily those of ABSA, those of any other regulator, or anyone else. However, from working with ABSA and the extensive experience that comes from registering many pressure equipment designs with Canadian registration numbers, with me, Cammar Corporation has a lot of experience to share about pressure equipment design evaluation and CRN registration. Please bear in mind that the comments in this presentation series are general in nature and that specific topics relating to your particular situation deserve greater attention and advice tailored to your particular circumstances. Please stay tuned for further posts. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at cammarcorporation.com.